I'll watch this on YouTube.
Yep.
Oh, you can hear me still. See, yeah.
And here we go. So, all right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Comics for All. Today is Friday, November 21st. Wherever you are in the world, thank you for joining us. My name is Jameson, a comics librarian, your host here at Comics for All. Today, we have Chris Stevens, the founder and publisher of Lighthouse Publishing. Chris, thank you so much for joining us out of your busy schedule. First things off, can you share a little bit about yourself, and then how in the heck did you get into comics as a reader? That's always the first question we start off with.
Sure, Jameson. Yeah, no, thanks for having me on here. I've been enjoying watching some of your other videos and
Thank you.
really enjoyed the video with Danny Fingeroff recently. I thought that was fantastic. Yeah, so I got into comics when I was pretty young, just as a reader, obviously, and crawling up the walls, pretending I was Spider-Man, that type of thing. And the exact memories are maybe a little foggy, but it was probably a couple older kids who had a stack of comics in a closet, and back then in the 80s, you'd go to, I'm sure you've heard these stories. You go to convenience stores, gas stations. Comics were just more of like readily available that way, Plus, the direct market had been born maybe mid late 70s. So by the early 80s, when I was a little kid and started to get deep into it, the direct market was already prevalent enough that even I grew up in a pretty small town in southern New Jersey, and the direct market was already established to the point where even a town of like 8,000 people had a little comic shop for a couple years. And that was sort of the, my first golden age of comics right then, 83, 84, 85, something like that, in this little local comic shop.
Love that. And then at what point did you realize that you could actually pursue working in the comics world like full time? Like at what point did you realize that?
Jameson, I'll tell you a funny story real quick that I've, mentioned to some of my friends, but I've certainly never anything I've put down in an interview or something. But I was about 28, and I was working at a sub shop, a sandwich shop, in a seasonal tourist beach town. And it was, a very busy place. And, the summers in South Jersey are hot and humid and sticky. And I was in my late 20s, and I had thought that I had some, talent for writing or some need to make comic books. And I just never really, when I look back, dedicated myself to it in any serious way.
Mm-hmm.
And here I was in my late 20s, and I was elbow deep into cleaning out like a 30-gallon trash can in a hot, humid day, and seeing other people going by on their way to the beach or going by, and and I just said to myself, man, I'm going to be 30 soon, and if I don't try to take this serious and do it, I'm going to be cleaning this trash can when I'm 40.
Yep.
And I, pretty quickly after that, it was a long road to get to a point of actually getting published, and it's still been an incredibly long road to have any kind of solidity, any kind of solid ground under you in comics. And I'm not even sure if I have that now, to be quite honest. But it was around that time where I decided, hey, I'm either going to do this or I'm going to be one of these people. I didn't want to, I'd seen other men, I'd observed men in my life who were probably, left with frustrated ambitions, and I didn't want to. I wanted to at least give it my all and see what happened, So I took a weird route where I was lucky that I had a friend or two who had more money than I did, and they knew I was serious about it, and I guess they thought maybe I had some talent at it and were willing to take a shot on it, and I was able to get a little bit of money that I didn't have, and approach some of the artists that were like my dream artists, and just guys I thought I could write great stories for, very youthfully, sure of my abilities or whatnot. And so like my first experiences were kind of probably maybe a little bit different than most people's, where like the first people I sort of worked with were Ryan Otley and Jay Lee and Arthur Adams and Farrell Dalrymple, and it was sort of this crash course in working with artists and just trying to get into comics. And luckily, a lot of that stuff 20 years later it will finally come to light in the next year or two through Lighthouse. So,
Uh-huh.
yeah.
There's a tease if there ever is one. Well, in terms of reading comics, has there been something that you've read this year? It didn't have to come out this year necessarily, but something you've read this year as a reader that you've really enjoyed that you'd like to highlight?
Yeah. One thing, a few things.
Sure.
I don't want to mess up the format. I don't know if there's a format to it.
Let's go with two.
Two things, sure. Okay. Well, this is maybe cheating a little bit because he's a friend of mine, and I'm, anyone who knows me knows I'm a huge fan. But Paul Pope's THB has been reissued from First Second through their 23rd Street Books imprint,
Yes.
and I don't want to slight anybody, and 10 people might have 10 different views on this, but I think Paul's probably the most. I think Paul's probably the greatest creator of his generation, and THB is the work that sort of established him and set him on the path to becoming that. And it's really, I mean, we're calling Tyrant one of Steve Bissett's lost works, in the sense that nobody's seen it in a couple generations at this point because it was
Yeah.
self-published in the 90s, and at this point people haven't seen it. But THB, Paul self-published THB as well. And not only that, THB came out in what back then would have been considered very weird formats that didn't fit the normal comic shop apparatus. So it was even more of an odd duck in the sense. I mean, it's revered by the people who experienced it, but it's not something that was seen a lot. As big as Paul went on to become, it's still kind of an unknown work of his. So I'm thrilled that that's coming out. I think the first one just actually came out into the stores, the first volume of the rebranding and reprinting of it.
Okay.
So that's one. And as far as like newer comic stuff, I'll cheat a little. I'll just throw two things out there.
Sure.
I thought the Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees, which I guess is
so good. So
yeah, that one is a little newer to me. And I had sort of experienced it in reverse, where I was at a comic shop and I really liked the logo. And I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know it was a hot book, and I didn't know it was kind of a breakout book, right? And I bought the first issue of what is actually the new miniseries. I guess it's just wrapping up now, or just, it's still coming out now.
yeah.
The Rites of Spring, I think it's labeled as. But then I went back and read the first trade too, and yeah, it's very. It does what I was talking to one of the people I work with, and I just said it does. You could pick anything, and sometimes things have flaws in them, sure, but it does what any good comic needs to do, and it really says, "This is my world. Come into it. I'm going to bring you into this world completely while
Right.
you read this book." And I think Patrick Horvath did a pretty good job of that. So that one, as a comic I've read, and then just a creator that I'm a little slow to catch up on here, but Jesse Lonergan, the stuff I'm seeing is really impressive. And on the same level as Javier Rodriguez's Martian Manhunter. So there you go. I snuck in 4 of them.
Now to kind of take a sneak peek at your craft and process and how you work,
Sure.
How do you balance creative voice with the editorial side when you're working with a group of creators?
Yeah, that's a good one. The book is always the main thing. So you have to, and it doesn't matter if it's a big star creator who's older than you and has done everything somebody could do in comics, or if it's a first time creator. If you're not putting the needs of the book first, then you're sort of shooting yourself in the foot from the jump. And it's how you wind up with, well, I'm gonna slip to say it's how you wind up with this or that, right? But yeah, no, you just got to put the book first, and it's easier said than done, sure. I think I approach it because I got into comics to be a writer first, and I had a few short stories and stuff published, and I've just done a lot more of this kind of stuff than I've done actual writing. But I think the fact that I approach it not so much as an editor. I almost stumbled into editing on some of my early books, even the bigger books. I didn't even I was technically the editor or one of the editors, but I didn't even take the title of editor. I wasn't thinking of myself, that way. But I think the fact that I do come at it creatively is usually a help to the creators I work with. And at the end of the day, it's really to if I'm going to take the editor role and work with someone like that closely, I'm there to serve them at the end of the day. And the experience and how I would handle approaching it creatively would depend on how much they want from me. And you can usually tell that. You usually know that pretty quick. You can usually, there's not too many surprises with that. You usually can kind of feel what somebody wants, so
That makes sense.
yeah.
Especially in people trying to get into the field or the industry, what advice would you give writers on trusting visual storytelling over heavy dialogue?
I'll probably, God forbid, my writer clients watch this, but I've hit a point where, to me, the script is to get to the layouts for the most part. And once you get to the layouts, I think, I'm not saying the scripts are not there for a reason. I just think that it's an artist's medium, and you get the best results when the artists have the most input they can, as long as they are, understanding what the goal is. So, yeah, yeah, that's sorry. My cat is brushing me. You can't see my cat under here, but I'm like, come on now. Everybody loves cats in comic world, though, so we'll be okay. I'm sorry, totally spaced. Did I get to the end of that one? I'm sorry. She's there.
That's okay. It's kind of actually a follow-up to that. Do you see editing as an invisible art itself, or something that's more of a co-creative process, kind of like you touched on? But I kind of just wanted to get your view on that.
It's not. It changes from project to project, and I never think of it as the closest experiences that I've had working with another creator, where it was their book. I still wouldn't walk away from feeling as any kind of co-creator. That's I think anybody in the editorial role who would feel that way is probably headed down the wrong road, because it's just not, no matter how close you are to something, to assume that there's a difference between being the co-creator of something. So yeah, I think the editor is the shepherd,
There's a good analogy.
Yeah. In fact, I'll talk a little here with Steve Bissett's Tyrant on my mind. I was on the phone with Steve, a while back, and I had said to him, we were just talking about his history, and Steve was the initial publisher of the opening chapters of From Hell and from Lost Girls. And I had just said to him, I had reread From Hell recently, and the Alan Moore, Eddie Campbell comic. I had just reread it. This was like maybe 6 months ago. And I was just saying to him, we were just talking about From Hell and the craft of it, just different parts and stuff. And I said to him, well, you're like the father of this, you're the father of From Hell, because he's the one who suggested Eddie Campbell, and he's the one who connected Alan Moore and Eddie Campbell. And he made very specific, he had very specific editorial input in terms of actual scenes and stuff, right? But Steve very quickly said to me, well, no, Chris, no. Alan and Eddie are the fathers of From Hell. And then I think we both said at the same time, no, you're the shepherd. You know what I mean? So even in that situation, and Steve was very right to say that, even in that situation, the editor shouldn't have any claim to to anything of that nature. That's not what the role is, and I think it's misguided, perhaps, if you go down that road. I see books, and maybe I'll get myself yelled at by somebody here, but I see books that where like the editor is in the credits above the title, and I don't know. That's just weird to me.
I have seen that, yeah. Now that you mention that,
maybe if it fits, sure, go for it. But hey, 40 years ago, all of it was much different. If you pick up a comic from the 80s. The editor's probably listed first or second, So it's pretty weird. It's like, but for
Hmm.
me, it's more of an invisible role, I would say, Jameson. Overall, more of an invisible thing. Yeah.
That makes sense. Kind of jumping into the Eisner experience, if you will, and kind of some career highlights.
Sure.
Obviously, winning an Eisner Award, if you don't know, basically it's the Academy Award equivalent for the comics industry. It's one of the top awards that you can get. What did that recognition mean to you when you got an Eisner?
I'll tell you two parts to that. Okay, it meant the world to me because when in 2000, when I was 24, 20, I was 25. I got to eat dinner with Will Eisner,
Oh man.
and I ate dinner with Will Eisner and his wife Anne, and I was so I had a bit of a misspent youth, and I was very excited to be eating dinner with Will Eisner. So excited that I openly said, "Oh, I wish Frank Miller was here." So it was, but along the way, I'm complaining to Will Eisner, who lived through the Depression, and I'm complaining that like, oh, I'm from Atlantic City, and there's nobody to make comic books with, and I'm just I write these scripts and I don't even know what I'm doing, and there's no one to make comic books with, and there's no artists, and he looks at me and says, "Where do you live?" And I said, "Atlantic City." He said, "Atlantic City." I said, "You need to go to Philadelphia. You need to go to Philadelphia and go and hang around the art schools. You're going to meet the right people there. You won't meet them in Atlantic City." And he just was like very straightforward. And then he ate a dinner roll, and the conversation moved on to something else, right? And I didn't move to Philadelphia right away. It took some years, but I did get to Philadelphia and wound up very quickly meeting the group of people that I formed Locust Moon Comics with, and we not only formed a little publishing imprint that did well, we opened a Locust Moon comic shop. So I always think of that when I think of Will Eisner, and for that reason, winning the Eisner Awards was lucky to win two of them for the Little Nemo book, and it meant a lot to me. It was very, very special to me, and it felt very fulfilling and very satisfying, and that's how it felt to me, and still feels, and it still feels. But the reality of it was that, and this is just funny to tell. And again, I've never really told these stories in something like
Sure.
this. Where, there was a period there where you win a couple Eisner Awards and you have a book that does pretty well, and like that, it was NPR Book of the Year, and it won like a lot of stuff outside of comic books, and like we did a talk at the Library of Congress for that book, and like there was just a
Awesome.
lot of outside stuff, and it got a lot of attention. And I would have people quite often, people who I wasn't close enough with to like know my doings and comings and goings. They would say, "Oh, you won those awards. You must really, oh, it must have really brought you this, and oh, you must be doing so great." And they're always talking about money when people talk. When people say
Hmm.
you must be great, they're usually talking about money. And the punchline is, and it is true, is that what it immediately brought me, like the proceeds for me professionally of winning the Eisner Awards, was I was hired by, now I'm a Jewish guy from New Jersey, and I was hired by an 85-year-old black gentleman to produce a series of African American church calendars,
Wow.
because he came into the shop and said, "You won the Eisner Awards, didn't you?" And I said, "Yes, I did, sir." So I don't know who else is an Eisner winner and quite had the path of success afterwards like that. But that's my Eisner Award stories. Deep means a lot to me. The deep means a lot to me because of Will Eisner. It can't be forgotten. And as time passes by and tastes change and things fall out of fashion, and it's natural that one era's works seem dated to the next era, all but the greatest works. And I do believe Eisner's work is worthy of that all but the greatest works,
Yep.
label. And so he's very special to me, very, very special. What he did for comics, it's hard to measure really. So yeah, having the awards because of him, and I hope to win some more. I'll be very honest, just simply because of him, I hope to win a few more. Yes.
Yeah. If you ever find yourself at San Diego Comic Con on Friday night, go attend the Eisner ceremony. It's a wonderful experience.
I'll send you a picture when this is done. I will send you a picture of my old partner, who's my still my friend and my current personal editor on a book I'm writing. I'll send you a picture of him carrying around four of them the night that the Little Nemo book won the awards.
That's fantastic. And you touched on it a little bit, but can you share an early career experience that was pretty challenging that you has really stuck with you over the years?
Oh,
Just one? Yeah.
well, you know what? Let me turn it. I mean, I should turn it to the only place it should go, and everybody hopefully, can understand this. It all comes back to you, So you say that, and I start thinking of all these different stories and all these different things. But at the end of the day, I would have to turn it back to myself and say, finish the things you start, and take responsibility for it, and just finish the things you begin. I started a lot of things that for doesn't matter what the reasons are, I didn't finish, and you know that's what I would say. Yeah, that's the biggest lesson I would learn personally is I had opportunities that disappeared because I took an approach to it that wasn't as focused and professional as it should have been.
Understood. And then kind of on the back end of your career right now, has your success and the things you've been through, has your storytelling or your approach to working on projects, has that changed over time? Has it evolved, or how do you feel like discussing that?
Yeah, no, it's certainly evolved over time. I worked very, very closely in the last 5 years with Nick Patara,
Hmm.
who's the artist and writer of Axe Wielder John and was the artist of Jonathan Hickman's Manhattan
Which we're about
projects.
we're about to talk about that. So
Oh, fantastic! Yeah, I worked very, very closely with Nick for 3, 4 years, about 3 years, I guess, 4 years, and Nick is a great writer, and he's gonna show people over the coming years that he's a terrific writer, and I think Axe Wielder John established that. But he's known as an artist, and I think he'd be the first to say that his formative years were he's formed as an artist, right? So I am coming at it more from the writer's perspective most of the time. And I've been the one who's been in the position of like the writer usually is the one paying the artist. The artists usually aren't paying anybody,
right,
right?
that's
So,
fair.
so like us coming together, it was a real great influence on me, and it helped me. It helped me realize that even in the past, when I always assumed and it felt like I was being as um, understanding of the artists and like as good as someone you could be to want to work with as an artist, I realized through my work with Nick, he helped me to understand the mentality of artists a little bit better, and it's helped me work. It's helped me greatly in my work the last couple of years, especially. Sure.
That's fantastic. So now we're going to delve into some recent works and things like that. So, as you mentioned, Axe Wielder John #1. I did get to take a look at it. It's visually striking, distinctive, both on the page and I feel like the whole thing. What were the biggest creative challenges of managing a production process like that? And what? Hold on, I messed my question up here.
It's okay.
What were the biggest creative challenges of managing the production process, from coordinating art and story elements to ensuring the campaign reflected the same larger than life energy?
Yeah, when you have a piece of work like Axe Witter John and a creator
It
like
is
Nick,
beautiful.
who he was just so on fire during the making of that there were no problems. To be honest, there were hurdles, and you're always going to hit practical hurdles. We had very, very high standards, and I don't think we wanted to compromise on a single panel. And when you approach it that way, maybe somebody could argue we spent a little too much time in post production, call it, or things of that nature. But there were no problems with Axe Witter John. It's one of the great, great creative experiences in my life, and just a hell of a book. Anybody watching this who hasn't seen it should definitely check out Nick Patara's Axe Witter John. Great, great book. Um,
Absolutely.
and the second part, the campaign. You know, as I'm doing as I'm doing Steve Bissett's Tyrant campaign right now, and we just went live yesterday, and
Hmm.
I'm lucky. Jim Rugg is designing the books, and he's he's there to bang the drum with me, and we've got the really brilliant guy, Sean Michael Robinson. You should reach out to Sean we'll talk about that after this. But
Yeah.
Sean Michael Robinson from Living the Line, he published the Eisner-nominated Strange Death of Alex Raymond book, which is just a terrific genius level cartooning in there from Dave Sim. But I've got guys like that, and then obviously Steve himself, and I'm lucky I've got some creator friends banging the drum with me. I've seen friends like Kurt Piers and Mike Allred sharing stuff, and that warms my heart, of course. But the campaign with Nick was really fantastic because Nick is just a hustler and savvy, and very Nick's a fun guy to talk with, and he was able to really. He was just a hell of a front man. One of the things, and maybe if there's anybody who watches who's like getting into this and they're doing their own Kickstarters and stuff, one thing I would say, I don't know if there's any true authority on these things. Something's either good and it catches people's interest and it does well, or, there's tricks to it. Sure, there are. But, at the end of the day, I don't know if there's any really true authority, so to speak. But one thing that's for sure is you need to be the front man of your own thing.
Yep. 100%.
And it's you have to be, and you don't have to be, you don't have to be, you don't have to worry so much that, oh, I'm not this, or oh, I'm not that. But you have to represent it, because if you don't, people are just not going to connect to it well enough. And I guess I mentioned this because you're about the campaign and how to keep the campaign charged, and your question, Jameson, with Nick and me doing it, and with Nick being the front man of it, it really was. It was a lot of work. Don't get me wrong, but it was pretty efficient, and it was a good time.
Love that. On that, because that one was actually on Zoop. Did you find any benefits or drawbacks on Zoop versus Kickstarter? Just kind of, is there any really comparison about the same?
They're very different, and I would encourage any creator who is not so much interested and is self-aware enough to maybe understand that they are not they're not looking to become a hands-on publisher in the sense of having boxes in their garage, and of dealing with customer service, and of knowing the best ways of dealing with printers, and the best options of dealing with printers, and shipping, fulfillment, warehouses, all that kind of stuff, right? What we might call infrastructure. Zoop is a godsend for creators in that vein. I mean, Nick chose to use Zoop, and we had, Kickstarter's fantastic, so it's not like I'm slighting one in favor of the other, but we could have easily been a very highly profiled project on Kickstarter. We had meetings about that and stuff like that, but Nick was, his vision with teaming up with the Zoop guys was correct, and look what they've just done. Zoop just had, I think, one of the 10 biggest creator-owned crowdfunding campaigns ever, and I feel guilty because I'm spacing on the name, but it's
Me too. I've never seen that
adult,
in the news.
kind of an adult D&D comic, adult fantasy comic. I think it made $700,000.
Wow.
Right? So they're great guys, and in fact, I work with Eric Moss, one of the Zoop founders and co-owners. I work with him on some stuff that's.
I'd love to have him on. That'd be great.
I'm sure that could be set up. Yeah, we'll talk after this. I'll give you his. Yeah.
Perfect. So the next title we're delving into, The Golem of Venice Beach.
Okay.
This brings together mythology, modern identity, and some really striking visual storytelling. How do you approach bringing together, especially a group of creative voices, while maintaining a cohesive tone in the story? How does an editor help do that?
Yeah, some of it's instinct, So with the Golem books created by Hanan Beiser, who's become one of my good friends over the years, that we started working on those in 2019, and they were actually the books. The first Golem book is actually the book that sort of set me on this path that I've been on the last few years, where I got like very heavily into freelance editing and putting books together for people, which is sort of led me now to just wanting to publish my own stuff.
Right.
But Hanan, when he reached out to me about the Golem, and this ties into your question about how do you choose the artist or deal with the artist, and how do you with the material, Hanan reached out, and he was working with Hanan is great because he knows what he wants, and that's one of the most excuse me, that's one of the most valuable things that you can ever have. He knows what he wants. And he wanted to, he wasn't a kid, and he didn't want to, he wasn't looking at it the same way a 25-year-old might look at it. He was looking at it more like a grown man, and he had a very successful career, and he didn't want to try, he wanted to try to build up a little bit quicker than just starting and putting out a self-published comic and, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And he has great taste. And he has great taste, and he has a wide knowledge of comics himself. And, he sort of told me, he wanted this book to be very high level. And it was at a time for me where I wasn't really doing much. And I realized very quickly, like, hey, this could be great for both of us. Hanan could get the book of his dreams, and it would sort of reconnect me to the stuff I had been doing, which I had sort of fallen away from, as I had a few years there that were like sort of years in the wilderness, let's say, so to speak. And from, so like the first person who signed on to the Golem of Venice Beach was Bill Sienkiewicz. And I've joked with people that once that I've joked with people that once that happens, the rest is easy, and it's the truth. I've known Jay Lee since not too long after that Will Eisner story I told. So I've known Jay Lee a very long time, and we're friends. But it was a lot easier to say, "Hey, Jay, Sienkiewicz is doing it," and he was like, "Oh, really? That's impressive. I'll do it." So. Hey. And then Michael Allred and Paul Pope, and so the Golem books were a fantastic experience. And with the artists, it was a thing where, from my end of it as the editor, I would read, I read the script, and that book is laid out where there needed to be one main artist who tells the narrative thrust and the whole arc of things. And there needed to be a couple side story type things, flashbacks or just asides. And that's where it opens up to okay, what you're asking about, how to match this with that, and who would do this the best. And some of that is collaborative, or some of it's even directive. If Hanan, might say to me, well, I really, Bill Sienkiewicz should do the Golem in Prague in 1590, right? And it could be that way, or for me, it could be I read a script that's got concentration camps and Nazi stuff, and certainly the last thing that would be true is that me and Hanan aren't sensitive to that. I'm Jewish, Hanan's Jewish, so like very sensitive to that. But at the same time, I've seen it a million times, and I wanted it to be something that had a lot of gravitas, just very quickly. And Jay Lee, pound for pound, Jay might, he's like the darkly elegant prince of comics. Anything Jay does just has a weight to it. So
really
luckily he agreed to do it, and he did both World War II flashbacks and volumes 1 and 2, and that was terrific. So yeah, it's a combination. It's a combination of what Hanan wants, of what we had available. I'm lucky that over the years I have built up a lot of relationships with some really terrific artists, and I try my best to keep in touch. And it's a very special thing to me. I have the same it turns me on the same way it did when I was 12. It hasn't really changed that way. So
love that.
Yeah, so it was just that was a fun thing to do, the Golem books. I don't know if I'll ever do anything else like that again, to be honest. Between the two books, the lineup is pretty, when you step back from it, it's pretty wild, the amount of talent in there. So I don't know if I'll particularly do that one again.
Well, next title we're going to dive into, Once Upon a Time Machine.
Okay.
Recognized for blending timeless fairy tales with sci-fi twists. What inspired the vision behind this anthology, and what were some of your principles while producing such a diverse range of kind of stories being reimagined?
Sure. So this is still relevant today, and it was even more so back then, perhaps, but I think it's still relevant today. The Time Machine book, the first one, it exists because at the time of its when it was first getting started, when it was just an idea, there was a lot of, this would have been the late 2000s, so like going into 2010, and there was just a lot of talk especially as social media was developing. The internet was an everyday thing and prevalent now. There was just all this talk that you can't get into comics, and you can't. It's too hard to get into comics, and it's not fair, and gatekeepers and
Hmm.
all that kind of talk, right? And there's some legitimacy to all that, and that's life, right? Like life, that's just life, and to whine about it doesn't do anybody any good. And I'm sure I was guilty in the past, of whining about it myself. But by the time the period that we're talking about rolled around, I wasn't in that mindset anymore. And I had moved to Philadelphia in like 2008. And that's when I met some of the people who, I formed Locust Moon with. And they were all very talented people themselves and creative. And I figured, between me, I'd already known and did some work with, like, I think I mentioned Arthur Adams and
Hmm.
Jay and Farrell Dalrymple. And so I had some connections, and I knew some people. So, but I hadn't done anything. I'd had a few short stories published. I didn't never had put out any books with my name on them or anything like that. And yeah, I don't know. The internet was there, and there was this site called Digital Webbing, which used to be a really awesome site for aspiring creators. People like Ryan Otley would be far and away the most prominent one, but God, I don't want to say his name wrong, but a very prominent Marvel artist, Mahmoud Asrar, perhaps is how you say it.
Yeah.
Um, but he's done a million things. But Ryan Otley, that guy, God, I think even Greg Ruth, who's he's fantastic. There were a lot of really a lot of good people in and out of that group.
Love it.
And yeah, it started off. There's probably still some digital. I'm sure it's still on the internet or whatever. But yeah, it was like I think it was called Digital Fairy Tales or something. And yeah, long story short, we when Locust Moon came about in 2010. I just said, all right, we're going to do this for real. This is going to be Locust. Like, we're going to make this. And we got turned down by every publisher there was. And we probably had almost 300 pages of it done already.
Wow.
And every publisher there was turned it down. And something that your listeners today, who might be, not as plugged into this stuff back then or a little bit younger, whatever, they might be shocked to hear this. But to the point where one of my very knowledgeable friends, a guy I respect, a guy who understood the publishing world at the time, said to me, just dump it at Image, because that's how, like, this was before Image became Image, right? This was like
Yep.
before the rebirth of Image, and it was like, just dump it at Image, right? And that's how much Image has changed, and since then, which is pretty wild, and I'm
Yeah.
thankful for the case. But no, we wound up at Dark Horse, and real quick, I'll try to tell the story because it is a funny one.
Sure.
We got to the point where I said to my partner at the time, and then the co-creator of the time, he's the co-creator of the Time Machine books and the editor, Andrew Carl. I said, you know what? Let's just send it to Rich Johnson and send him some of the artwork and just see what he does. And Rich Johnson, on his own, published an article that I'm pretty sure was the greatest anthology never sold. And something like 2 days later, Rich messaged me and said, "You got something up there?"
Oh no, go
Something
ahead.
like,
I'm thinking of something for coming up, but go ahead.
oh yeah. No, but yeah, something like 2 days later, Rich messaged me and said, "Hey, Mike Richardson wants to talk to you. Do you want to talk to him?" Well, I mean, you can imagine what the answer was, right? So
Right.
that's how Time Machine wound up at Dark Horse. And the real nice part of it was that even back then, that book came out in 2012. People talk about creators' rights and all that stuff, and I've seen some publishers screw over creators recently in really vile and disgusting ways. So that's, but even back then, Dark Horse, everybody who contributed a story to both the Time Machine books, they own that thing, 100%. So even back then, that was a nice perk of Dark Horse sort of treating people the right way most times,
Yeah, and I actually had Patrick Thorpe, editor over at Dark Horse, on the channel earlier. I don't know if you saw his video.
No, I might have missed that one. That's great, though. Yeah, no, you're getting great people, man.
Yeah, I love it. So the next one we're going to dive into is The Marvel Art of Mike Allred. It's more of an art book, which I love art books, especially as a librarian. We love purchasing them and having them in our collections. Of course,
I'm looking over this way because I've got some of his stickers on my wall here.
Right, and I pulled out actually a cover from the Pedestrian that he had done.
Oh, nice.
So
That's
I got
I
this
didn't
at
know.
San
That's
Diego
new to
this
me.
year.
That's new to me. I love it. Okay,
I did too. It
fantastic.
was the pedestrian, but then it was his very distinctive artwork attached to it, and I just thought it was a perfect pairing. So obviously, this book showcases his iconic style and legacy within comics. As the editor, how did you approach organizing, curating, celebrating his body of work while also honoring the collaboration with Laura Allred?
Yeah, no. Well, look, Mike is one of my great inspirations, and I don't say that as hyperbole or trying to score points. He knows it, and anybody who talks about comics with me knows it. I still remember the room I was sitting in and what the light looked like falling through the window when I read Mike's issue of the Sandman that with the Prez, and then Madman was like a very I was that started right when high school ended for me, and it was like an era of Madman and Jeff Smith with Bone and Paul Pope with THB, David Mack with Kabuki. Those things to me, who had these sort of high-minded poetic ideas in my head, and I saw work like that being done. These individuals who were putting their stuff out, in that way. And Madman was quite philosophical in its own way, and so Mike's very dear to me. And to get to when I was aware that this Marvel art book line was going to be made, and asked to maybe contribute to it, Mike was one of the first names that I said, like, hey, we definitely got to do the Marvel art of Michael Allred. So yeah, I'm glad it came out so well. Mike's thrilled with them. I've got them sitting behind me here, and they're super well produced. A guy named Curtis Finley is the designer on those, and Curtis, he does a fantastic job. The process would surprise some people, and It's not super. I mean, I guess on the publisher end of it, with the Marvel approvals and stuff, there's some hoops to jump through. But even that seems to be just waiting around for Marvel to say yes or no, and for the most part, we already know the answers. But as far as putting the book together, it's I don't want to say. Putting the book together is fun. I was going to say, and if anybody's offended, they never heard it, but it might make people laugh to know that the maybe the most useful tool in putting together a Marvel art of book is like one of these pirate comic sites, because there's just times you need screenshots of things to figure out stuff.
Yep.
And Marvel's not sending them to you, and the creators don't have them handy. So that's one of the weird little ironies, people, of maybe putting together those books. But no, it's fantastic. It's look, I know his work very well, so I had the book layout in mind in terms of like the sections were very obvious. You know what I mean? It wasn't. Honestly, anybody could have figured out, oh, okay, there's going to be a Silver Surfer section, and there's going to be this and that. And the selection process was just a joy. It brought, I think it brought me and him. It was just me and him, and I think it brought me and him, closer together, which was cool. I'd known him a little bit from the past, and he was in my little Nemo book, and he was in the first Golem book, and so we're connected that way. But this process was terrific, and I'm looking forward to the main thing to me is I know how happy he is with it, and I think we accomplished the goal of, I think that is an evergreen for him, and that he can go, and every con he goes to, he can be happy that all his Marvel work, and not all of it, but a lot of the best parts of it are embodied in there. And touching back to Laura, man, let me tell you, like I think the biggest thing that I got out of it personally was, I know how good Laura Allred is of a colorist. I have very harsh views. Like I might be I take coloring and lettering pretty seriously, and I do think overall the standards have really fallen pretty far in the last 10 years or so. It's like there's the people who are good are great, but other than that, I think the standards in both things are pretty much whatever. That's another talk one day. But I know how great Laura is, and I've known it a long time. But I didn't understand, and maybe the best part of the process for me is, as I was going through, I literally looked at every single panel and page that they ever did for Marvel. Every single one. Every image they ever produced for Marvel, I went through and decided, hey, is this, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And doing that. And in the process, I read a great amount of the comics too. Like I didn't just, some of the stuff you just look at quickly, but I read you know, I couldn't count how many like complete issues I actually read panel to panel to panel. There are no bad panels. There are no lazy panels.
Nope.
And those books were coming out on a monthly basis where maybe there was a fill-in artist once a year. I don't want to misspeak here because it's not super sharp in my mind, but maybe there was a fill-in artist here and there. I don't even think there was on the second, maybe not even on either Surfer run, but the other books had maybe had a fill-in artist here or there, but the Surfer runs I don't think had any, in fact. And there's no bad panels, no lazy panels. And as someone who understands what that means, it's just kind of almost like it shouldn't even be possible. And at the end of it, I realized like what they are. It's not just like because Mike has this rock star aura to him, and he can back it up with the body of work. And his name carries a lot of shining lights around that name. And they're a very prominent couple. Like it's anybody who's
Yeah.
into comics to any degree really kind of knows they're one of like comics first couple, right? And they're both just beautiful people, like they're good looking people. So that's like also a part of it, right? But what I came away with it was firmly, and I hadn't thought of it this way before. Honestly, is I just got done putting a book together for one of the handful of greatest creative teams in comics history. That's what Mike and Laura Allred are. They're just, as a team, that's one of the greatest creative teams in comics history. I'm not sure it quite gets looked at that way enough. I mean, it's nuts to me that I think they both only recently won their first Eisners, like in the last 5 years or something.
Yeah.
Like I couldn't believe Mike didn't have 10 of them or something. But yeah, no, that's the Marvel art of Michael Allred, and I know he'll have them to sell anytime he's out, at the shows or whatnot. And those books were a joy to make, true joy to make. Hoping, yeah, I can't say, but yeah, hoping we're doing some more stuff like that soon.
Yes. I don't know Curtis, but I've seen Curtis on the Near Mint Condition channel. I follow that channel too. So the next thing we're going to talk about is actually something really cool that you got to do called Prometheus Eternal. Fascinating blend of myth, art, and modern storytelling produced in collaboration with the Philadelphia Museum of Art. My question with that is, how did working with such a prestigious museum, number one, influence your approach to editing and shaping the project's narrative and visual style? And then what were kind of some of the unique challenges, but also some of the rewarding things that you got out of it too?
That was a very interesting book, and I'm happy that it's something that's in the that I like, so to speak, put up on the shelf.
Mm-hmm.
I'm happy it exists. I named the book, and several of the artists in there were artists I had brought into the book, or however you want to look at it, like approached and said, hey, you would be good for this. But I wasn't really the main driving force behind that book. My partner at the time, Josh O'Neill, who nowadays owns Beehive Books. He was more hands on with that one. I think the museum approached us going back to the Eisner Awards. We had won the Eisners, and the museum said, "Hey, we're going to have this Prometheus exhibit for Rubens, for Peter Paul Rubens," and they were going to have an exhibit of the famous Prometheus painting by him, and then lots of other masters. They even had, I'll never forget, the Prometheus comic was displayed in the museum next to, I'm going to screw the date up, but it was something like next to like a 1482 Michelangelo chalk drawing.
Wow.
So it was wild. Yeah, they gave us a private. The best part of that, to be honest, it was, well, Grant Morrison. That was fun for me. When I was in 8th grade, I wrote a book report on Grant Morrison, and I had to fight with the teacher to be allowed to write about comic books and all that kind of stuff. And on the Prometheus book, I was able, with the help of the closest thing I probably ever had to a mentor was Bob Schreck, a sort of legendary editor. And Bob, he knows, he's a very influential guy and worked with all the best people. And I kind of begged him to put me in touch with Grant Morrison. So we got Grant Morrison to do a little short story for that Prometheus book for the museum. Thought that was fun. But yeah, no, I wasn't totally involved in, the editorial direction was they said they would give us this much money to make this many pages. And then they said, we can't give you that much money. Can you still make the pages? Right. So it was, if I'm remembering right, God bless David Mack. I think he did his pages for free. you know,
It's such an amazing art. I think he's got a book with Clover Press too, if I'm not mistaken.
I made that book too. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, I brought those when they told me about that line. I suggested a few people, and I wound up putting together David Mack and Mike, and I think they're getting ready to do Mike Zeck. I'm not working on those books anymore, but I brought Mike Zeck into it too. I just won't be able to. I think Curtis is going to take the reins on that one. So yeah, no, those books came out great.
Very nice. And then kind of getting into our closing segment, but not, closing in terms of not cool stuff. For this one, I actually wanted to give you kind of a platform to talk about Lighthouse, since that's the big news of the week.
Thank you, my friend. Thank you. Yeah, no, all the stuff we're talking about is fantastic. And before I throw Lighthouse in there, I'd just be remiss if I don't mention that I'm really enjoying working on Image Comics Lost Fantasy with Kurt
So
Pierce.
good.
Kurt brought me into his operation, and Kurt is one of the most savvy, productive, just whip smart young creators that I could imagine. He's got all these books at all these publishers, and we're working on a bunch of stuff together. And on 2 days ago, today's the 20, yeah, 2 days ago was Lost Fantasy Day, where the first trade came out along with the giant size number 5. So I just wanted to sneak that in there because I'm having such fun working on it. But yeah, no, Lighthouse is sort of, I'm 51 years old. I've been doing this professionally since, I haven't worked a different kind of job since 2008. And, this is sort of the what I've been building to, and when I realized that the freelance editing work was successful, and I was able to make a living at it, and I was having fun with it, and like clients were happy and books were being made, and it was like the life of making comics 7 days a week. And I realized, this is life now. Like I spent some years howling at the moon, so to speak, and not taking things as serious as I should have, and I wanted to correct that and make up for lost time. And I've worked a lot in the last 5 years. A lot of the stuff hasn't come out yet, but it will be. And I've just, at times, I've had 26, 27 different projects going. I feel like I don't have much going on right now, and I think I still have like 17 projects going on right now, not counting Tyrant, right? So I worked a lot on this stuff, and it's you get to the point where you want to do something and not you want to sort of live or die on your own merit, and you don't want to be beholden to anything else, right? So that's what Lighthouse is for me. And Tyrant was always there's some other books that are already underway, and it's too soon to mention them, but there are 3 other books, Lighthouse Productions, that are already well underway and going on, and hopefully people will be excited about them in time. But Tyrant was always the first book, and as it coalesced in my mind about how I might go about trying to do this, Tyrant was always, there was never any vision I had where it wasn't going to be with Steve and Tyrant. And I have a love for Steve that probably embarrasses him sometime, but Steve is about Steve's the generation that came before me, and I've known Steve's name since I was 8 years old, 9 years old, when the anatomy lesson came out, which, I was talking about this with Jose Villarrubia recently, and I think Jose's made some posts on it. The anatomy lesson today still might be the greatest single issue ever, and it certainly has claimed to, the greatest horror comic ever. But that came out when I was 8 or 9 years old, and I was in the comic shop, and there's the teenage kids, and everybody's talking about Alan Moore and the DC comics of the day, like Atari Force or Blue Devil or whatever the hell. They would have the little house ad for the anatomy lesson, and it's like in my brain. I've got a copy of it sitting behind me, signed by, Steve sent me, nice enough, signed by all the creators. But my love of Steve and what Steve is, Steve is simply one of the greatest cartoonists who's ever lived. Just he's one of the greatest cartoonists who ever lived. His lettering I know Scott McCloud doesn't agree with me, but his lettering is as good as the rest of what Steve does. Um, and like everything, his lettering, the writing, he's known as an artist and he's known as a horror artist. And I understand that, but the totality of Steve's gifts as a cartoonist, not many people have possessed them. So I knew Tyrant was this masterwork, and I had the single issues that he self-published through Spider Baby Graphics, little black and white newsprint, traditional old school comics. And I'd had them when they came out, and they always held a special place in my heart. But like I said, a couple years ago, about 3 years ago, I said to myself, "Man, I'm going to do this freelance editing stuff, and I'm going to get back. I'm going to try to publish some stuff and do my own thing." And I started to think about it, and I messaged Steve. Steve was in the first Golem book. He was in the Little Nemo book, and we were friendly enough. And I messaged him about it, and he said, he wasn't interested. I messaged him again about it, and he said, Chris, thanks, but I don't think it's a good idea. I messaged him again about it. He said, Chris, I appreciate it, but I don't think so. And then Steve saw an episode of Cartoonist Kayfabe, which was the Jim Rugg and Ed Piskor YouTube channel that I'm sure I don't probably have to introduce it to people, but Steve saw an episode they did on Tyrant, and Steve messaged me and said, "Hey, did you see this? Maybe you're right." And we like to joke about that a little. So yeah, it's been about 2-3 years, depending on how you want to look at it. A good 2 years of getting to the point where we hit yesterday of announcing Lighthouse, and I was thrilled. Publishers Weekly. I want to, Rob Salkowitz, terrific guy, and won a comic series journal. Yeah, you just had him, right? He was. So Rob Salkowitz, terrific guy, and article was fantastic, and Steve's excited. Jim Rugg, I've been friends with pretty much since I got started. When I was telling you about cleaning out that trash can, I met Jim a few years after that through my friend Farrell Dalrymple. Jim was just creating Street Angel at the time, the first issues of Street Angel. And what an honor. I mean, it's an honor to get back with Jim, and a thrill because Jim designed the Little Nemo book that we've talked about earlier. So yeah, Stephen Arbissett's Tyrant, finally back, Jameson. It's never been collected. I think someone your age and the generation, under Jim and I, has, most people haven't seen it. We are going to present it to the world in two. We're making multiple editions. The campaign's going to be for 2 editions, and they will be, hyperbole is worthless, right? But they'll be about as nice as those kind of books have ever been. One will be an original art edition, and one will be the complete edition collecting, you name it, anything Tyrant related will be in there. And Jim's designing both, and Sean Michael Robinson from Living the Lines providing his. Sean's the expert on line art reproduction, so I think there've been amazing artist editions made by multitude of companies. Dark Horse makes great ones. I think they call them gallery editions. And of course, the Godfather, let me say this publicly, Scott Dunbier.
Yeah, Act 4.
You're the godfather of this, and you don't get enough credit for it. And thank you so much for creating the artist edition format, as well as the absolute format. What you've
he won like 3 Eisners just this year, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, he's without Scott Dunbier pioneering the formats. Anyone who traffics in these sort of books, especially publishers who make money off them, they owe him a huge, huge thanks. In a just world, he'd get a royalty on every artist edition ever sold. But Scott Dunbier, thanks a lot.
Well, this is a good question especially in a situation like Lighthouse is, where you're bringing stories that have not really truly been in a collected edition, if you will.
Tyrant's never been collected, Jameson. This is the first time ever.
So in that sense, do you have a favorite part of the process, from like idea to like finished product? Do you have a favorite part of the process that you really enjoy?
My favorite part of the process is, and likely will always remain, when Steve said yes. No. I'm messing around. I mean, obviously, but no. It's so. Here's the thing: working with Steve and Jim on it, Sean, of course, too. Sean's I work more hands-on with Steve and Jim and Sean work more together. So when I say with Steve and Jim, I'm not slighting anybody in that, but working with Steve and Jim on it, and actually, it's again, it's I've been friends with Jim a long time, but everybody's busy, and you don't always talk, and you could go a couple of years and not say much, right? And
Yeah.
fall out of touch. So even just being bringing us back in touch more has been great. Um, but really, for me, I said this to Steve on the phone the other day, a couple mornings ago, and I said, "Listen, I'm not trying to we got our eyes, we got to focus on this announcement, right, and all this stuff." I said, "But I got to tell you, and I'm not trying to make you feel bad, but I've never. This was 2 days ago too, and I've read Tyrant a million times, and I said, Steve, I've never been sadder that it's not going to get finished, because the plan he had for it when he was a younger man in a whole different life, that's what life does to you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
May we all finish all our plans, right? It's not that easy, right? So he produced 4 of his planned 12 issues of this masterpiece. And I guess for me, the rediscovery, you put a book out like this and you have to take it serious. And I want to know every aspect of it as well as I can. So I'm rereading them the other day, and I'm just my glasses off, and I'm poring over every detail. And I get to the end, and yeah, I got a little, yeah, it's, there's things this is probably a generational reference over your head, and I shouldn't be making it either. It's before my time, but it's almost like never getting to see Marlon Brando play Hamlet. It's one of these yearning things where, a great creator who's inspired us and or given something back to the human condition. You almost want to, you want to squeeze a little more. So the same way I wish Marlon Brando could have played Hamlet, I would love to see those, the rest of of Tyrant's story. But the 4 issues that are done, and we've got supplemental materials, some of it which people have never seen. We've got the opening scene to issue 5, which no one's ever seen. And it's going to be presented in a way that's going to be very, very special. Even in this world, I know we're living in a true golden age of artist edition type books and premium books, and I understand all that, and I've been a small part of it over the years myself. But these books here with Jim and with Sean and Steve's complete involvement, and everybody just having the highest standards, and being able to build on what Scott Dunbier has given everybody with this format, yeah, it's going to be special.
I'm looking forward to getting a copy myself.
I'm pretty sure someone will sneak one your way. Santa might have you on the list,
So, Chris, where can people find you and Lighthouse online?
Sure. So Comix Lighthouse seems to be the place to find Lighthouse across the social media world. Anybody starting this stuff up, if you got a company name, get your social media stuff straightened out early. It ain't easy. Yep. You want to drive yourself nuts trying to get the URLs and all that stuff. And oh God, I'm lucky I had my friend helping me, because that's not my forte, and it was still a nightmare. But Comix Lighthouse, Jameson, Comix Lighthouse on Facebook, on Instagram, on Blue Sky, TikTok. I'm told the first TikTok video goes up tonight. I'm not too involved in that. I bought the dinosaur toys and sent the directions. TikTok doesn't seem like me, and TikTok, I looked at it, I said, I don't think a guy like me belongs on here, so we got somebody that should be fun. But yeah, Comix Lighthouse, Jameson, and that's where, and I don't know, and forgive me for being so transparent, there's a way you can share the pre-launch link through here somehow?
Yeah, in the description of the video, that's where it'll be.
Fantastic.
So my last question is kind of an oddball question that I give everybody. Do you have a favorite snack or meal that's a go-to when you're working, need to knock a couple hours out?
Sure. I drink a lot of hot tea. I don't know. I know, I drink a lot of hot tea. And lately I figured out, my wife bought this fancy espresso machine.
Ooh.
And for 6 months, the thing might as well have been like a robot, like a cyborg robot, hard to figure out type thing. I didn't even bother. And then one day I sat there and figured out how to use it, and that's been a little problematic recently. It's so I drink a lot of hot tea. I drink lately a fair amount of espresso. And in terms of snacks, I snack on like little handfuls of cereal. Weird as that might sound. Yeah.
All right, Chris, thank you so much for joining us today. I know everyone's got a really busy schedule these days, so thank you for taking some time out of your busy schedule to join us. So this has been another episode of Comics for All, where creativity, comics, and community all connect. So thank you so much for joining us wherever you are.
Thanks, Jameson. Thanks for having me and letting me talk about Stephen R. Bissett's Tyrant. Coming soon. You still there, buddy, or should I hang up?
There we
Still
go.